I wanted to first start out just by saying thank you to all of you from all the ADRCs and all the collaborative projects and so on, because without your hard work to collect data and so on, NACC would not exist, basically, or at least we'd be a shell of what we are today. Also wanted to thank NIA, because of course without NIA we wouldn't exist either. And we wouldn't have been in existence for the last 25 years. So wanted to thank you for that. And then last but not least, I want to thank all of the NACC staff and faculty for all the hard work that's gone in to put on this really great meeting. It's been really amazing. And so before I use up too much time, I'll just go from there to introduce Dr. Biber, who's going to really kick off the whole thing and tell you all about what's going on at NACC. And so listen up and have a good time.
Thanks, Bud. Okay, hello everyone. It's good to be here with you again. I am excited to take a deeper dive today into some of the upcoming modernization that is underway at NACC and also the transition to UDS v4. And I'm thrilled to have some wonderful colleagues joining me today to address different aspects of the UDS v4 transition and the resources that we've been developing to support this work and to help answer your questions during the Q&A session. This session is going to also feature some demos, which is very exciting. Before I wanted to get started, I wanted to further emphasize what Bud just shared, which is that everything that I'm going to share with you today and others are going to share to you was made possible by the incredible team at NACC. I want to thank everyone on the NACC team for teaming up to accomplish this really important work together. And can all of the NACC team members that are currently in the room or not working outside and other things, please stand up and just raise your hand. Thank you. Yeah. Great. So I really encourage all attendees to connect with them and learn about the great work that they are doing at NACC. So now let's jump into the NACC modernization and UDS v4 updates. So I want to start by just saying that NACC data is fair. And one of the fairest aspects of NACC data is that we convene experts from across the country every few years through our clinical task force to define the latest clinical research standards for the field. So UDS data is standardized right before it comes to NACC and serves as the gold standard for how clinical phenotype data is collected all around the world. So UDS has been translated into lots of different languages and used all over the world for ADRD studies. So just a few stats on that. So UDS v3 alone has been translated into 33 different languages and has been used in 147 different international research studies. Since 2022 alone, NACC data has been requested by investigators from more than 58 different countries. And there's also been, this has been used to drive major breakthroughs in the field. This is just a smattering of some exciting recent papers from the past couple of years. So, and as I mentioned yesterday, right, this data is being requested more and more. We've seen a 102% increase in the number of data requests and a 23% increase in the number of published studies using NACC data. So today I'm going to talk through a little bit about UDS v4 updates and timeline. Before I do that, I want to say thank you to the clinical task force. This has been a huge collaboration over the past couple of years. We're not quite done yet, but we've made amazing, amazing progress. So I want to just give a round of applause to the clinical task force for everything that they've done. They volunteer their time for this and their expertise for this, and we could not make these updates to UDS, and have this be the gold standard for the world for this kind of data if we didn't have their expertise to draw on for this. So thank you so much. And I also, we've leveraged their expertise and worked together to make some critical new updates to UDS v4. So that includes incorporating disease-modifying drugs, a new mandatory form focused on social determinants of health, introducing new concepts like subjective cognitive decline, mild behavior impairment, as well as adding things like new verbal learning tests. And we've also made changes to UDS v4 to make it more inclusive. So, as I mentioned yesterday, 100% of the content is now complete, 100% of the REDCap forms are now developed. I want to walk through this timeline that Cerise shared yesterday in a little bit more detail. I hope I can see it from over here. So essentially, what I've already shared is that the content is complete. The REDCap, initial version of the REDCap forms is complete. We may make some additional modifications to that after the pilots that are going to be launching later this month. And then we are aiming to start UDS v4 data collection across the ADRC program this September. So that is coming up very soon. We would then expect all new UDS data collection to happen using UDS v4 after that point. But we would continue to collect a backlog of UDS v3 submissions for another year after that. And then essentially, we are also thinking about things like Spanish and Chinese translations. And since there is going to be a delay in the Spanish and Chinese translation forms being available, we are going to continue to collect UDS v3 for Spanish and Chinese-speaking populations. And we're also considering extending UDS v3 data collection for a few of our affiliated studies. So you're going to hear more from my colleague Jess Welch about the NACC and UDS v4 pilots that we're launching later this month that we've developed in collaboration with others across the ADRC program, including the CTF. You're also going to hear from my colleague Sarah Gothard about some of the resources we've been working really hard to develop for the ADRC program so that we can help facilitate a smooth transition. So that includes things that she'll walk you through. All of those draft documents are already available, and we will be making some additional updates to those after the pilots based on what we learned through those pilots. So the pilots are not going to be to change the content of UDS v4, but it is going to be to help us create better guidance documents, better training materials, those sorts of things. So in addition to providing all those resources, there's also going to be active support. So we have a community forum that we're launching. There's going to be office hours available. The CTF is going to be doing some trainings. You'll get to hear more about that later on in the session. And as I mentioned, we are developing translations of UDS v4 in collaboration with several ADRCs. And those, you can see there on the timeline when we anticipate those will be available. Okay, so we're committed to keeping you in the loop and providing support. You can learn a lot more at the end of the session today through our Q&A panel with some of our key collaborators from across the ADRC program. And then we will continue to provide updates via newsletters and through our website. So I want to share a little bit about, I mentioned we're building next generation informatics infrastructure, and that includes for supporting UDS v4. So I want to share a little bit about what aspects of our new NACC data platform you're going to be interacting with through the pilots and through UDS v4. So one of them is our electronic data capture interface system that we have built. This has been, as I mentioned yesterday, a major collaborative effort between NACC and the Electronic Data Capture Work Group, which was launched back in January of 2022. We now have 97 people across 33 ADRCs that are working together to define requirements, develop forms, to create documentation and training materials. And we have built what I think is a very flexible, modern, scalable electronic data capture system that is really going to save time, enhance sharing, and hopefully also improve data quality. So you'll actually get a demo of the submission interface shortly, but you'll be accessing that submission interface through the ADRC portals. So this work has really led to a dramatic increase in REDCap adoption and EDC adoption across the ADRC program. This is the data from our most recent survey that you can see there on the far right, and we're just thrilled that more centers are jumping in and realizing the benefits of electronic data capture. And we will continue to collect PDFs. In fact, as you'll learn later, you can basically send us any kind of use whatever you want upstream as long as you can send us the CSV in the correct format. So I want to thank all of the EDC workgroup leads and co-leads and for their incredible collaboration on this. Our work together is ongoing, but this is a really important point to be able to pause and recognize what we've accomplished and celebrate this collaboration together. And there are a lot of folks, you've probably seen these slides going by and the rotating decks, that I want to thank from all of our work groups. We'll be sending out some information to directors, really highlighting the contributions of their team members that have been involved in this collaboration across the ADRC program. So it's not too late to get involved. We continue to build more aspects of this electronic data capture system together. And so if you would like to get involved, you can go to nacdata.org/EDC and sign up to get involved. And so in addition to another feature of our new NACC data platform we'll be interacting with through these pilots is our ADRC portals. And so the ADRC portals I mentioned yesterday are really designed to make it easier for ADRCs to submit, view, audit, and access their participant data. And so when we say view, audit, and access participant data, ultimately what you're going to be able to access there is not just UDS data, but a variety of other data streams for your participants. That includes neuropathology reports, heterogeneous MRI and PET data. You can already go there to view your ADRC-specific scan QC dashboards and see what is going on with your scan submissions, whether they've passed QC, if they failed QC, why that might be. And then in addition to that, you can also access you'll be able to access your genetic and genomic data there for your participants, blood biomarker data, eventually clarity data, and also participant diversity dashboards. So I want to just highlight, you'll be hearing about this later from Jess, but through these pilots, you'll be interacting with two key aspects of the portal here for managing participants, including assigning NACC IDs to your participants at the time of consent, as well as submitting data. And so along those lines, I did want to mention that, we will continue it's great to submit your data via REDCap, but we also, it's possible to use basically any local EDC as well as still submit CSVs, into this new ADRC portal submission interface. Okay, a couple more things about becoming multimodal, and I want to highlight the scan story here as part of this. But we know that in order to tackle the most pressing challenges in the field, researchers really need to be able to readily access increasing amounts of multimodal data that are high quality and harmonized and integrated. So that has been a real focus for us at NACC over the past couple of years. And this is a lot of work, trying to integrate all of these additional new data streams and building interoperability with all these other NIA-funded repositories and initiatives, but it's really important work. And I want to zoom in a little bit and talk about what our work like that has been with SCAN. And so SCAN, as you heard about yesterday from Dr. Jagas, all the exciting developments there, it's so exciting to see data coming in. It's really focused on collecting large quantities of standardized imaging data and integrating it with other data modalities that are available at NACC and sharing it with researchers around the world. So NACC has played an important role in this project, and really the focus of our work has been in a few key areas. One is on facilitating ADRC participation, supporting data quality, providing data access. I want to share a little bit about that and some updates there. So first of all, I'm thrilled to share that just last week, we launched our new SCAN website. So this has up-to-date information on the SCAN initiative. It's where you can go to access your SCAN, the live SCAN dashboards. It's where you can go to access your ADRC-specific dashboards if you would like. And there's also a lot of other really valuable information available on that website. So I encourage all of you to go to scan.nacdata.org to visit that. And we have seen a dramatic increase in SCAN submissions over the past couple of years. So we are up now to more than 3,500 PET scans, 22,000 MRI scans that have been submitted from across the ADRC program, and that's from across 36 different ADRCs. We've also seen a 90% increase in the number of ADRCs participating in the SCAN initiative, which is fantastic. And so, we've been doing some work to help support data quality in the sense that we are providing ADRCs with up-to-date information on the status of their SCAN submissions. So you can go to your ADRC-specific dashboards within the ADRC portals, and you can see, have your submissions passed QC? If not, why did they fail? And rapidly address those issues. The very exciting news as well is that scan data is now available through the NACC data front door. And so you can access information about scan data through our quick access file data request system. It takes about 15 minutes for researchers to submit a request through that quick access file system, and then they will get all of the data within 24 hours. You can also, as I mentioned, go to the real-time scan dashboards to take a look at what data is available from across the ADRC program. So there's a view of those public scan dashboards. So you can see for each ADRC how much data has passed QC for both MRI and for PET. And then through the quick access file data request system, you're able to access for MRI, brain volumes, cortical thickness, and surface area data, as for PET, SUVRs for amyloid and tau. So this is incredibly exciting to be able to make this data available. Here's a little bit more detail on specifically what types of PET data you can access. This is information that we're also going to be sharing via email, so you can stay tuned for that, as well as what specific MRI data is now available from across the ADRC program. So you can get this, fill out a 15-minute request. You can also access the data for your individual ADRCs through your ADRC portals. So just as a look ahead to what is coming, so here's what we've done already for SCAN. We have provided access to the ADRC, MRI, PET, QC dashboards. We've provided access to we've created these SCAN public dashboards. We've now added all of this valuable analysis data to the quick access file data request system. You'll soon be able to access all of that data for your participants, all the SCAN variables within your ADRC portals. That's coming in July of 2024. And then we're working to make it possible for you to access raw data, as well as build cohorts using this data via the data front door in the next couple of years. So help us keep the data flowing. I know both Cerise and Bill mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again. We need you to work with us to make sure we can keep this flowing. And so the important thing here is to only submit SCAN-compliant MRI and PET images to SCAN and Lonnie. You can still submit heterogeneous, non-SCAN-compliant images to NACC, but you need to do that through a different interface. And so you can learn all about that at the new SCAN website that I mentioned to you. So please go there and have a look, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So I want to thank the whole SCAN team and the Imaging Core Steering Committee. We've been thrilled to be able to partner with all of you to make this data available both to the ADRCs and to the whole research community. So a couple other things, we're not stopping there. We are continuing to work with other partners, as I mentioned yesterday, to be able to integrate additional data modalities and to build more interoperability. So we're excited to keep you posted on that. And ultimately, we will also be building out our third component of the data front door, which will allow researchers to build their own multimodal data sets, selecting from across those different types of data. And so you can join us, like I mentioned again yesterday, to get involved in sort of helping to shape the future of that infrastructure by joining our AAIC Multimodal Data Workshop this summer. So thank you very much. And from there, I'm going to pass off to my colleague, Jess Welch.
My name is Jess Welsh. I'm the project manager here at NACC, and I get to talk to you about something really exciting, which is how you can start getting involved with a lot of these changes that we've been talking about this whole time. So I'm going to talk to you about NACC's pilots. So we're doing pilots as part of this modernization rollout for two of the key aspects of what Dr. Biber just talked about, which is we are piloting our new NACC ID process that was announced at the last fall meeting in 2023. This is a new process with a new workflow. It's going to represent a change in when NACC IDs are assigned. So it's going to be a new form, and we'll get into the details in a little bit. But the NACC ID, again, is the process that ties all of these multimodal data streams together and allows this modernization and connection to happen. The other piece I'm going to talk about is our UDSV4 pilot, right? So whether you consider it a labor of love or a labor of labor, the content is ready, and we're going to open it up for you to be able to start using it and looking at it and provide feedback. So we'll talk about that as well. So here's the timeline for these pilots specifically. So at your ADRCs on May 1st, you should have received an an email inviting you to nominate a point person at your ADRC to participate in the pilot. And from there, next week, we're going to do kickoffs, and we're going to invite all of the point people to the kickoff meetings, and then we'll go through all of the pieces that you'll need to know to participate in the pilot. I'll go through it briefly today, but we'll go through it in all detail and provide all the resources at those kickoff meetings. They will be recorded if you can't attend in person. We'll also be distributing those pilot resources at that time. All right. And then we will be running the pilots through June and July. So you'll be able to interact with the submission interface, the ADRC portal data, as well as provide that feedback to us, and we'll have a midpoint meeting to check in with all the participants as well, so that we'll be able to collect all of your feedback during this initial period and incorporate it into the final rollout. The go-live anticipation, as Dr. Viber said, was July for the new NACC ID process to be rolled out, and then September for starting to collect those UDSV4 data. All right, so I'm going to dive in a little bit to the NACC ID process pilot. So for the new NACC ID process, the whole point of this process is now to assign NACC IDs at the point of consent. And the reason behind this is this drive to become more multimodal so that data can come in different orders as it does in the real world. And assigning that NACC ID at the time of consent allows us to tie all of those data streams together earlier in the process. So it's that unique identifier that's used to link across all of the data streams that are coming in to NACC. So the current process looks like this. This makes it a lot less visible. You might not even know when the NACC ID gets assigned. But once an ADRC starts working with a participant, you'll consent them at your site, then you'll complete the packet, submit and finalize the packet to NACC, and that's when the NACC ID gets assigned now. With this new process, when you consent, you'll submit a short, brief form to NACC that just has the minimal amount of information in order for us to be able to assign a unique NACC ID. And then we'll assign that, and you'll have it available immediately, and it will be available also to all of the other data streams that are coming in for that participant. And then you can complete that UDS visit and then submit the packet at any time after. So here's a just graphic, high level how it works, right? So we'll do the consent, we'll get the form submitted, and then those NACC ID will be available. So the benefits of this are really just that we're looking to streamline that collection of the data and be able to integrate and share it more directly. And so they'll be able to submit in any order, and that NACC ID will accompany that participant throughout the duration of their participation in the NACC program, and it will also be tied to all the other incoming data streams. This will improve participant tracking. It's going to support better transfers in between centers as well, so we'll be able to track in between and not lose people, hopefully. And this, another important thing to note for you all is that this will not impact the way that you collect or assign your local participant IDs. I want to say that again for those in the back. It's not going to have any impact on your local IDs or your NIA GUIDs. Those will remain the same and under your center. So this will be rolled out at the same time as the UDSV4 transition as well, so we can just do it all at once. So the benefits if you choose to participate in this pilot, and we do encourage all of our ADRCs to participate, is that you will get early access to the ADRC portal. Right, that's where you'll be able to submit your data, access, audit, all of those things at the ADRC portal. You'll also have access to that submission site, so you'll be able to test out all of the different submission types into our updated submission site. You'll be able to see the new errors and alerts, redesigned errors and alerts page, and you'll be able to see and access the NACC hosted, which is new, REDCap form. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the UDSV4 pilot. So the goals of this pilot are slightly different, which is that you'll get familiarity with that actual content, right? So you'll get to interact with those updated UDSV4 forms. You'll be able to still test the same ADRC portal, the same forms. You'll also, if you like, be able to test the NACC-hosted REDCap forms for all of the UDSV4 data. You'll also have access to those files if you choose to set them up at your own local ADRC as well, or your own local REDCap system. You'll be able to test how long it takes to administer the forms and provide feedback on that to NACC. And you'll be able to provide feedback on the guidance and the documentation that you receive as well before we do the final rollout later this year. So the pilot for UDSV4 looks like you will get access to the packets and you will be able to use them in an actual visit. The estimated time for administering the packet for UDSV4 is about 5 to 6 hours. And the data, if you do submit and test that way, the data will be stored in a completely separate space, so it will never be mixed with any live data or production data for UDSV4 or any other versions. It's just for testing. So the steps for the UDSV4 pilot are a little bit more involved because they do involve contact with participants as well as new form content. So the first step is going to be to gain IRB approval, and that will happen after NACC provides at the kickoff meeting a packet with the UDSV4 forms and the coding guidebooks. So you'll have the materials that you need to seek that approval. The next step is going to be to use those forms to administer up to, or more or less, five or more participants. And we're looking for, a mix of different diagnoses representing a diverse group and separately from the UDSV3 visit, but relatively close. So we're looking for about within 3 months. Then you'll be able to submit that data to NACC, no matter how you collect it, whether it's PDF forms or if you're using your local EDC or NACC's hosted EDC. You'll be able to use either our REDCap system, a batch file CSV upload, or use an API, a highly anticipated API submission system. So you'll be able to test any of those submission types in the UDSV4 pilot. And then the last step is, of course, to assess how it went, assess how the resources worked, and then provide that feedback to NACC through REDCap form or surveys. We're looking for feedback on how did the forms go, how did they flow, what was the administration time, how did the documentation and guidebooks work, do you need anything else, and what was the functionality of the submission process, so your experience actually submitting the data using the updated portal. So I can tell that everyone here is feeling very excited and looking to get involved. So that is what I'm going to talk about next. So if you want to get involved, your next step is to nominate a lucky winner from your ADRC to be the point person for one or both of these pilots. And that's just through a REDCap survey. And sign up by this Friday so that you're added to the meetings next week, or get the recordings and the materials after. And then those are the dates for our kickoffs. They're also on this slide. And you can attend or watch the recording for the kickoff meetings. That's where this will be explained in even more detail. We'll go through the submission types. We'll provide the sample code for those of you who are really excited to get the API going. That will all be available after that time. If you're so excited but you still have questions, the UDSV4 booth is right outside the door that way if you're local here to Austin, or here's my information if you're watching remotely. Or the data platform booth is out the door straight ahead, I think. And you can ask about the NACC ID pilot or the submission system or options or the ADRC portal. So it's not too late, and you can come and see us if you have questions. And that is all I have for you today. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Viber.
Okay. I forgot to show you guys the demo. Hold on, I'm going to go back and do that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. This is the great demo that my colleague Brendan Smith put together. So let's go ahead and play that.
We're excited to update you on the newest features of the ADRC portals. The ADRC portals, first introduced in October, are a critical new component of the modern NACC data platform and provide a secure and user-friendly interface for ADRCs to be able to submit, view, audit, and access their participant data. They also provide tools for ADRCs to manage participants, including assigning NACC IDs at the time of consent via our new NACC ID process. Down the line, ADRCs will also be able to access on-demand, real-time ADRC reports through these portals, which will help replace the static reports that are currently emailed to ADRCs and NIA each month. Here, I'm going to introduce you to some features of the ADRC portals that you will interact with during the NACC ID and UDS v4 pilots. Let's start by walking through how to assign NACC IDs through the new system. We'll come here to Manage Participants, and we'll be presented with 3 options for data submission. File upload directly within the NACC data platform, where we can upload a CSV file with data for multiple participants, direct data entry into NACC's REDCap system, and programmatic upload directly to the NACC data platform via API or command line interface. Documentation for the API can be accessed here. For data submission, we have similar options. In the future, we'll be building out additional data modality submission interfaces here. Currently, UDS v4 Pilot is the only available data stream, and here we'll be presented with similar options for data upload. We can also view, audit, and access participant data via this portal. Here we can find the UDS v3 web portal, as well as the scan QC dashboards that we introduced back in October. We're excited to build out additional functionality into the ADRC portal, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on the pilot project.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And thank you to Brendan Smith for putting together that great demo. And next I want to invite Sarah Gothard to the stage from OHSU, who's a representative from our electronic data capture work group.
So I'm here to talk to you guys about all of the resources that we're developing or have developed with NACC and the EDC work groups to move us forward into the transition to UDS4. So as an overview, some of these things, the resources available to us are going to be the onboarding checklist, the EDC website, the EDC workgroup website, live trainings, and the ADRC community forum, which I am very excited about, and that it's rolling out soon. So one of the resources that's going to be made available to you that is being developed by Jess Welsh at NACC is the UDS v4 checklist. This is going to be a step-by-step roadmap for your transition at your ADRCs. It will be exhaustive. It will include links to data capture resources, regardless of your data capture or data storage platforms. It will have training resources and links to all of the resources we're talking about today. It'll have how-to guides. It'll have decision trees. It's a lot of work. You're welcome. And has all the additional support resources that will be integrated into the checklists. It also will be an opportunity for you guys at ADRCs to track your progress and have NACC track your progress in your transition to UDS v4. And it'll allow you to reach all of the milestones that you've seen and your individual and local ADRC milestones, should you have any, independent of NACC. It'll allow you to prepare your staff, support you in preparing your staff's transition into UDS v4, preparing your site, starting data collection, submitting your data, and doing the error checking and finalizing of your data. Another resource that the EDC work groups that I sit on have developed, it's exhaustive and I'm really excited about it, is the EDC work group website. So all of the deliverables made by the EDC work groups can be found here, in addition to all of the resources that you've seen today. It will be an intuitive ADRC or EDC work group website that is the life cycle of the data. So it'll have documentation, step-by-step guides on how to move forward to UDS4, step-by-step guides on how to upload your data, how to create a REDCap project, and it'll be exhaustive. So please check it out. You can see the website link there. Another exciting resource that we have developed in the requirements EDC work group, championed by Chad Murchison out in Alabama, is something we're calling the Data Elements Crosswalk. It's a novel approach to identifying changes between all of the UDS versions, between UDS version 3 and UDS version 4, where it maps out in detail all of the changes that are occurring between UDS 3 and UDS 4. Its most immediate function is to identify those changes in explicit detail. They're built for each form individually, and they're going to be a tool downstream for harmonizing data sets between previous versions and UDS 4. It's going to be available in 2 different file types. It's going to be available by form as a CSV file so that's human readable, and then it'll also include the work that Chad Murchison is doing in a JSON file that allows you to be digested into SQL, Python, and R scripts to quickly change your data between data sets. It won't be available for the pilots because we're going through the due diligence of contacting the CTF and having them look through the transformations that are identified in the crosswalks and the mapping. So the EDC workgroups have done a lot of work in creating the REDCap project that is going to be deployed to all the centers. It has been pushed through by Laura McLeod's team, and now is available to anybody to start collecting their data. And you'll be able to do that using any of these 3 file formats. So the XML file is the entire project. It includes all of the event structure, again, championed by Debbie Zemlock, and it has all the external modules enabled. It is ready to go. And it includes reports that will allow you to export your UDS data and be ready for upload into the flywheel. It also has a REDCap data dictionary that can be imported into an empty project. And again, all of your forms are completely ready and are ready for end users to interface with the forms as they would expect to see them, because they are mirror the PDF forms created by NACC. And there's also zip files that if you have an existing project, that you can just upload your UDS4 zip files, and those forms are ready to go. I like to think of them as kind of like the a la carte kind of things that are available. And as you can see in the little graphic, on the EDC website, every form will have their crosswalks, their zip files, and then you can have the high-level documents like the JSON file and the XML file if you want to deploy it. So allow myself to introduce myself on how easy it is to do an XML demo or an XML upload. So, hello.
This video demonstrates how sites will upload the REDCap XML file to initiate a full UDS4 REDCap project. This demonstration assumes that you've already downloaded the XML file from the NACC EDC website. First, you're going to log into your institution's REDCap instance. You are not going to go into My Projects. Instead, you're going to select New Project in the upper left-hand side in green font. Once in the New Project landing page, you're going to enter a project title. Then you will select a purpose. If you select Research, the drop-down data entry is optional. However, it is best practice to at least enter your PI's information and your IRB information. And we're going to select Repository for the purpose of this demo. Next, you're going to select one of the 3 radio dials. It will be the center radio dial that says Upload a REDCap Project XML file. You're going to choose the file from where you downloaded your XML project. Select Open. As you can see, your project has been uploaded to this file upload field. And then you're going to select Send Request at the bottom of the form. Please note that depending on your administrative privileges at your institution, this could also say Create Project. We're going to select Send Request. The request has been sent, and your administrators at your institution will either initiate the project for you or it will be automatically created.
You're welcome. It's great stuff. Thank you, who's applauding? I appreciate that. Just Jess, she's it. And so Dr. Biber also had this slide, but we really want to reinforce that REDCap has a lot of benefits to be used. But those of you who are not going to be using REDCap for your EDC, for your data capture or data storage, you're not alone. And most of the resources you saw in this presentation and amongst all the other presentations are available regardless of your data capture platform. So with your submission process, as long as you upstream have curated your CSV file or your data sets to work with the NACC system, you can import and get everything to NACC just like anybody using REDCap. You are not alone. Another way that we're going to support the transition into UDS v4 is live trainings. Some of you are already aware, or all of you are already aware, they're doing clinical trainings and webinars, but they're also going to include technical trainings, and what I think is really interesting, office hours, where NACC team members and content experts are going to be dedicating time to answer your questions, and there's a dialogue around the transition, and you're not alone. And so the last thing I want to talk about is something I'm very excited about. It's the ADRC Community Forum. And so what it is it's an opportunity, it's a website on Discourse where ADRCs can connect and share experiences and share resources. We all think these meetings are super valuable. But to bridge the gap between those meetings, you can have conversations on this platform about important topics, and it's not local to it's not only data managers and data storage and REDCap. It could be any of the questions that all of us have in the experience of the ADRCs. So, the new registry, does anybody have infrastructure, SOPs? How are you guys managing best practices for brain donation? You can have these dialogues on this platform, and it's visible to everybody. I'm really excited about it. And it's going to be moderated by NACC. You can post public threads, you can follow threads. And another really cool feature, accidentally, is that NACC can data mine this resource and see what's important to us. What are we talking about? What's being followed the most? Who's having the most conversation? And can make live changes based off of that information. So in summary, there will be checklists. There's a website with everything on it. There's going to be live trainings, and there's the ADRC Community Forum, so we can help each other move forward in the UDS v4 and the maintenance of UDS v4. So if you'd like to connect with me, you can send me an email. Happy to do that. Or I'm already on Discourse, so find me there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I still get my...
You can.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, Sarah. So I want to call up my brave ADRC colleagues who agreed to join me for the next panel. That would include Dr. Jaika, Director of the Clinical Core of the University of Kentucky, ADRC, and member of the Clinical Task Force. Ari Baumick is the Center Administrator for the Michigan ADRC and Chair of the Administrator Steering Committee. Dr. Jeff Burns is the co-director and clinical core lead at the University of Kansas ADRC and a member of the clinical task force. And Dr. Das is the data core leader of the Massachusetts ADRC, co-leader of the EDC work group, and co-lead of the CTF Tech work group subcommittee. And Dr. Farias is leader of the clinical core at the UC Davis ADRC. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to sit down too. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And so we, reached out to all of you. Thank you to everyone who filled out our UDS v4 transition survey. Having this information collected from across ADRCs is really, really valuable as we plan for the UDS v4 transition and work to make sure that there's adequate support in place to ensure a smooth transition for the ADRC program. So we know that you guys have questions and concerns, and we're here today to try to help address some of those. You learned today about some of the additional resources that are going to be available to you, or are available to you now, many of them, to help set yourself up for success at your ADRC for this transition. And we expect that all of the ADRCs will participate in the 2 pilots that Jess described. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the survey results that we got back. And we asked all of you, as part of that survey, some questions about what is your strategy locally for how you're planning to transition to UDS v4. Some of my colleagues here are going to help talk through some of these questions and responses, and also share perspectives from their ADRCs. And then we're going to also have an open Q&A portion of this as well. And so the first question that we asked as part of this for the survey was, how will you approach clinical training? And my colleagues, Sarah, Greg, and Jeff, are going to comment on that and share some of the feedback that we heard through the survey. So I'll pass it off to you guys. Who wants to start?
So, I guess I'll start. So thank you all. We know that we have this challenge ahead of us, but the data that we collect is going to be well worth it, I think. I've personally been concerned about this, because a lot of the changes have really been implemented in the clinical forms, the clinical judgment of symptoms, B9, and Form D1A and D1B for clinical diagnosis, and then incorporation of etiologic diagnosis in D1B. So I do think, that NACC has really done a great job working with the Clinical Core Steering Committee, Cindy and the rest of the group, to build some of the webinars that we've already had, and those are posted online. So I've actually asked all of my clinical staff that they must watch all of these videos, and we're tracking that. I do think that a lot of our training, at least at my center, is going to occur in the context of application. So I'm already setting aside time that our consensus meetings are going to take extra time for the first month or two, so that we can work through together the complexities that we're going to see in different patients. So I think that that's really, really important. But I think every clinical core member and leader really need to think about this. How are you going to get up and running? And what are the resources available to you to make it work at your center?
I can go next. So at our center, we have started using a lot of nurse practitioners to do the physical exams. And so I think in that context, we may need to do more training than we would otherwise if we were having neurologists do the exams. And here I'm kind of thinking of particularly the subjective cognitive decline category and the mild behavioral impairment category that they are not as familiar with. So there's the great video on the UDS website that we'll utilize, and then really just doing more in-home education on those syndromes so that they feel like, they really understand what those syndromes are. With the subjective cognitive decline, I think we'll probably do that as part of our diagnostic case conference, since you have to have access to the neuropsych results to confirm that they have normal cognition.
All right, so at our site, we use REDCap and face-to-face with the patients with direct data entry. So I think the challenges are getting the clinicians familiar with the new forms and the new process, and then consensus. We're going to need to tweak our consensus process a little bit, but I don't see the clinical training as our big issue for implementing this. We're going to have a process where we'll probably have our clinicians do 2 or 3 people after they see a patient, spend some time, build some time into their schedule so they can spend some time with the forms, entering data, getting familiar with the forms before we go live. But it won't be a huge jump because they're really familiar with REDCap forms and working with them. And then on the consensus piece, because we're separating syndromic from etiological, moving the biomarker information into the consensus process is going to take some thought and work in terms of that movement of data. So we'll focus on those two in terms of the clinical training, those 2 pieces.
Fantastic, thank you all. And so some of the themes that we heard from all of your surveys, and we had all but one ADRC complete the survey, thank you everyone, was leveraging existing resources and meetings at their center, taking advantage of direct training by clinical leaders at their centers and really allowing for that shadowing to happen, practical engagement, utilizing webinars and workshops, and then developing documentation and doing consensus building locally. So these were common themes that we heard from across all of your centers, and you can see there some of the additional comments that came directly from survey responses. So we're going to transition to the next area, which was we asked all of you how you will approach data manager training. And so I'm going to look to Ari and Sudeshna and Jeff again this time to share some comments on that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, for implementation at our Michigan site, and I know John is there, so Data Co-Manager John will be doing that out there. So this is really going to be a team approach where the Data Co is going to be a support center, support at the shoulder level across this out there. One of the great things is that we've been using REDCap for a long time, is just now sort of having the practical aspect and making sure those team meeting with the clinical core, admin core, and data core, and bringing that team together. And so we will focus on a team where we'll have meetings. We've already started to have these discussions in the coming months, and we will continue to have that as the team approach will be there for the data core to support the clinical core as they move forward and implement these forms out there and use that.
Right. Yeah. We are also going to be implementing very much, a cross-core interdisciplinary team approach. So for our training, I was involved from the start with Dr. Biber here in the EDC work group, so have been looking at the development of the forms and the infrastructure needed. And so it's this really exciting time that we've been cooking this, and it's time to deliver the baby. And so we're really very much looking forward to that process. And in terms of our data manager training, she's Beata Gabriela. She's also part of the EDC work group, and so this is not going to be new for us. We have been involved with this from the very start. And then we are also going to be leveraging all the resources that we heard Sarah articulate. So we are going to, there's going to be checklists. There are going to be live training sessions, and there'll be community and website. And so, as part of the EDC work group, as we worked together, it was not just a product. We also built a community of people. I'm so excited to, continue that community online using Discourse. So we will be, approaching this with all the different trainings. So we don't anticipate, too many hurdles and switching from UDS 3 to 4 because we've also been using REDCap for a very long time. The main part of it will be the submission process, and as much as we love the current process, and thank you, Florida, ADR's Florida one for the amazing NACC letter. We're very excited to be using APIs and modern systems to be depositing the data. So really looking forward to that. And unlike a baby, we are very excited to be participating in this in the pilot, because we are going to have a stage rehearsal before the full show. So again, we signed up for that for the pilots, and we're hoping that we can work out all the kinks in that pilot process so that it's a much smoother transition than just leaping right in.
If I could just jump in on that, I'm not a data manager, and I don't play one on TV either. But I do think that that's an excellent point, and it's something that we're working on at our center, utilizing the cases that we're going to do in the pilot study as part of the training platform for both clinical training as well as database management and integration of the two. So that pilot project, everybody can think, oh, this is just another unfunded mandate. It's not a mandate, it's an opportunity for centers to really dig in and work on that training. So I really encourage all the centers, that are thinking about it and haven't yet committed, that this is really a low burden, but an excellent opportunity to reinforce some of these critical issues and concerns that you've raised.
Yeah, okay. So building on that, I guess our data manager, Suzanne Hunt, over here, is part of the EDC work group as well, as it sounds like others. And so she's really tuned into what's happening, which is great. And I think that's critical, because I think the data managers will be at the center of a lot of this in terms of getting those forms up and running and working with our informatics team to get those built. And so I'm hoping she trains us as opposed to us training her. But so yeah, that I think that's the big issue, I think, at our site, is how do we get these forms built? How do we get them in a sandbox of sorts where we can test them and play with them and get used to them and get the clinicians hands-on, and so that's our plan.
Yeah, and we were very excited here, of course, to see the big increase in Red Cross adoption across the ADRC program. I showed you that figure earlier, and that so many folks are planning to participate in the NACC and CTF-hosted trainings and webinars, and are already starting to plan for, meetings at their center to get this rolled out. So that's fantastic.
And to add to that, Sarah, I'll just say, please use the sandbox. This is your opportunity to see how things work, familiarize yourselves. In fact, we even talked at our site to do about just a mock session for us to just even before we even jump into the pilot, make that time, because there are so many resources coming through NACC, and especially with the Discourse Forum, the playbook for UDS4 and how you implement it will vary from site to site a little bit. So definitely adding that information, this knowledge that you could do there, your clinical core leads, your clinical core managers, data core managers are very important. And so thank you.
Yeah.
But I'll just make one more point too. As I think it's critical to have a strategy. This is probably obvious, but have a strategy for a local work group with the key players and the regular meetings and communications, so that you're holding yourselves accountable for those milestones and meeting them. And so we've just started a little small work group with the data manager and the data core lead and a couple clinicians to start thinking about this process.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so we also asked all of you, what are the anticipated impacts on participants and how you manage those? Is, of course, an incredibly important topic. And I want to invite Greg and Sarah and Jeff, and also anyone who else wants to jump in and make some comments on that.
So I guess I'll launch again. We've shown it at some of our prior meetings, an initial pilot that we did very early on. Now the forms have been modified a little bit. I do think there should be an expectation that there is going to be a slight increase, at least with the initial visit packet on our participants, probably in the range of about 20 minutes or so. That's the estimate from the initial pilot that I did over a year ago. And I think that folks should be planning for that. With that being said, the follow-up form packets include a lot of carry forward of data, and I think that we're actually going to save time, and we're going to see a reduction in participant burden for visits following the initial visit. And so I think that that's really important. I think it's important for us, and we will be alerting our participants prior to coming in for their annual visit that the battery has changed somewhat, that they do need to plan a little additional time preparing them so that we're not blindsiding our patients with, hey, wait a minute, this is not what I've been doing over time. I think that that's really, really important to include our participants as partners in this, and explaining to them, some of the primary changes in the forms that will be administered to them. A lot of the changes come at the back end for the clinicians, and the participants are not going to see that. That additional burden. So I do think there'll be a split of slight increase of burden on participants for initial visit, increase initially for the clinicians. But again, I think the follow-up visit packets are going to really make things smooth, and we're going to actually see a reduction, both participant and clinician burden is my expectation.
I'll just jump on that and say, I mean, from a participant standpoint, I don't anticipate they'll notice anything really in terms of extra burden. I guess what I'll be a little worried about is if we are extending the time, say the clinician is having to spend on the visit, our scheduling strategy, is it going to interfere with that, and how we do things? So I guess I would think about your clinician time and how you schedule, and maybe give a little buffer to make sure, you're not setting things up, for problems, but just to get a sense of how quickly these are going to go, which we think maybe a little longer in the short term, but hopefully shorter in the long term. But so we'll put a buffer in and add some extra time early, maybe for the first month as we go live.
And I think we'll probably do a study time to just see like how much more time it's taking so that we can, again, kind of schedule appropriately. I think the other thing just about the participant impact might be the collection of the social determinants of health. And we already collect some similar data, so we'll need to figure out how to harmonize that. But, I think in collecting that data in the past, we have had questions from participants about, why we're collecting that data. And so I think it'll just be really important to train our examiners because, some of it is sensitive information. So we'll want to just make sure that we're training our examiners so that they feel comfortable answering those questions. And then, of course, participants can opt out of answering any of those questions as well.
And I think that is an important part of the pilot that is being planned, not just to pilot, bugs in the instructions of the forms and to work on how we deliver those forms, but actually a recording of the timing so that each center can set up their own workflow. So that's critically important to me. And if NACC wasn't conducting a pilot, I would be conducting a pilot at my center because I need that critical information to make sure that I'm optimizing that flow for both my participants as well as allocating clinician time, as Jeff mentioned. So again, I encourage you all to help us participate in that and get your workflow smooth before we actually implement.
One of the things that one of the center responses that NACC shared with us before the meeting was that some of the forms could be filled out by the participants like before the visit. So that is something that might be possible for doing the social determinants of health, where they could have more time at home, like thinking through and answering those questions.
Fantastic, thank you. You see some of the themes we just talked about there as well. And so next we're going to talk about what new processes do you think will be needed at your center? How are you planning to put those in place? We've heard a little bit about that, but we'll add to that here as well. Sudeshna, do you want to kick us off? And then we'll also jump to Greg and Jeff.
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of the clinical, like the biggest changes are in the diagnosis and the clinical parts of the forms, as Greg and Jeff mentioned. And one of the big changes is like biomarker-based diagnosis. So we would have to implement new processes about how we can get that data before the visit. So the so the clinician who's filling out those diagnoses can have that data before they fill out their final diagnosis. So there is some amount of change in the processes that we have to implement at our center, and the other ones are other big changes are right now our research assistants and clinical research coordinators manually submit the form, or actually not manually, but through NACC and upload the CSV form into NACC, but we have to make sure that we are able to do this at the data core, where the data manager has implemented process to automatically upload those forms. And finally, we haven't started thinking about it is, how do we adapt the systems that query our cohort, both, starting from like MDS version 3 and 4. And so those processes have to change and be adapted so that we can harmonize and integrate the UDS4 data with the data that we've already collected over the last 40 years so far. So we do see some changes there, but again, the hard work that the team has done, that Sarah Gothard mentioned about like having crosswalks is going to facilitate and help that process. But again, that is something that we need to budget time for and think about as we roll out UDS4.
Yeah, I think really, really important. I think a few things will change. Number one, the new NACC ID process, I am such a big fan of. This is just going to be so helpful for us overall. But that is a new process. It's a change, and so people need to be prepared for that. I think that's important. I think one of the processes that we're thinking about, that was alluded to by Sudeshna, is whether or not in our implementation, we decide to allocate some of the forms to advanced completion by the participants when they're able to smooth out clinic flow. This is going to be a work in progress, and we're going to have to see whether or not that process needs to be implemented. I suspect some hybrid may well be. And then again, touched on by Jeff as well as the others, is this issue of, at least as we're starting out, depending on how much you incorporate biomarkers into your consensus conference currently, that requires an entire workflow, which is really, really important. And I know we're talking about implementation, like let's collect the data, but one of the areas that the CTF was really, really focused on was not just getting data into the system, but the end user. So I do think we're going to hit a point, as well as UDS4 data is collected, where when we make our data requests, we're going to potentially get mixed data. Some data from UDS3, some data from UDS4, and I think that's a later issue that we're going to need to address, but again, I think a process that requires some thought by centers for the research that we do that's going to come out of UDS4.
Yeah, and I'll add, I see this as a great opportunity to really tune up the processes after a visit is done. And if we're getting that biomarker data into consensus, that means we've got to get the imaging analyses done, and the biomarker core needs to get the fluid biomarkers analyzed, and then that data has to flow back to consensus, and that's hard to do, but a great opportunity to work on the workflow and the timeline. And so we're trying to tighten up and have sort of time windows for how quickly we get those analyses done, and then that data flows back and becomes useful at consensus. And so we'll put a lot of effort into that to really, I guess it's a big challenge if we want to use that biomarker data, but I think you can use this opportunity of the transition to UDS4 to make those workflow improvements and enhancements and all, and then benefit from it.
Thanks so much. So next we're going to talk about how you manage cross-core communications to ensure effective coordination across your center. And we're going to start, Ari, do you want to kick us off for that?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Sarah. So communication is going to be a very big factor and has always been here. And for our centers, we have already started the process where our clinical core leadership, biomarker core, neuroimaging core, and the admin core and data core are meeting. So we are having smaller core leader meetings out there where we're talking about all of these things that are coming across there. The goal is for us to work with the core leaders, your core managers, develop a checklist, keeping it simple. NACC has developed checklists for you. Utilize those things there. I know it adds another meeting to your calendar, but I assure you, when you sit down and you talk these things through, it will work out in the end there. Holding a monthly meeting and then sort of keeping that update through your center. So you have center-wide meetings. So you have, if you have your executive committee monthly meeting, dedicate some time towards that to say, here are the updates. This is what we are doing. This is what these core leaders have met. These three cores, your clinical, biomarker, neuroimaging core have met. They are implementing these things out here. Keep people up to date on that. That, I think, is going to be very good. Also for us to make sure that any major changes, any unanticipated things that you could see in the transition, you're highlighting that and you're saying, okay, this is what we found, and this is how we are going to actually fix this to make sure that it is a much more smoother, streamlined flow out there. And I think that's good we have that there. So I know adding another meeting is there, but maybe you already have some meetings where you could carve out some of those times to make sure that those are happening out there.
Ari, I think you missed the OR core. I think the OR core is incredibly important here. They're outreaching to our communities, especially our underserved communities, in their presentations, in their recruitment, in their retention efforts, having the OR core intimately aware. So we intend, at least at our center, to have the OR core members come and shadow some of the initial pilot implementations so that they're prepared to communicate these changes. Why are we incorporating social determinants of health? Why are we asking some of the more in-depth gender identity and some of the more sensitive questions? What's the importance there? This needs to be communicated. So the OR core is going to be a critical player in the successful rollout of UDS 4.0, as well as all the other cores that were mentioned.
Thanks. Sudeshna, do you want to add to that?
So at our center, we also have, monthly leadership meetings, but the other one that we have, which is probably going to be a little bit more useful for this, the UDS 4 transition, is we call it a data and operations meeting, where other than the data people, like we have representatives from each core to attend these meetings, and these are people who really have like the boots on the ground people, not just the leaders, where we discuss like things about processes and operations and making sure that we can debug any issues and really get to like the details of stuff. In addition to like the strategy, the monthly meetings that we have with strategy, these data and operations meeting, which we'll probably have to make it more frequent with UDS 4 rollout, where we can think about tactics and details.
Fantastic. Okay, and lastly, and we want to make sure we leave time for questions, so we'll try to keep these answers kind of brief, but how do you anticipate roles will need to evolve at your center, and how will you facilitate this evolution, make sure roles and responsibilities are clearly defined? Greg, do you want to kick us off?
So, I suspect that, the basic roles of the individuals at the center are not going to change, but some of their operations are going to change. And I think that it's really important that we recognize that we really make sure that we're allocating the time for that to occur. And I do think, having, lived through UDS 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and now 3 to 4, we do know know that whenever there's a transition in our data collection, setting up leads, clinical core to data management, to manage those transitions as independent working groups is really important. So we've already assigned so that everything doesn't fall always on the core leaders, who frequently can be very, very busy. We've set up folks, within the clinical core to integrate with the OR core, the clinical core to integrate with the biomarker cores and the data management cores. And I think this is really, really important. And giving those extra responsibilities is going to require some shifting of time allocations. And I think everybody really needs to look at that in their center. What you're planning on doing, how are you going to move the pieces so that you win the game and do it successfully is really, really important.
Thanks, Greg. Would anybody else like to add to that? Okay. All right. Well, we want to open this up to questions from the group here. So please feel free to jump in with your questions.
Yeah, I can kick things off with a virtual question. The first question is, I assume due to the significant changes to many forms that it will be expected that every participant will have a full set of these initial forms completed once UDSV4 starts. Exactly how is that going to work for the submission of our follow-up visits?
How is it going to work for the submission of follow-up visits? So everyone is expected to have their participants go through the initial packet for UDSV4. I'm wondering if someone on my research team can comment on how we're going to do that for the follow-up packet. Who has the details on that?
Sure.
Yeah,
Catherine
Catherine says every participant will need to complete a UDSV4 initial visit packet at their first UDSV4 visit, regardless of whether they had prior UDSV3 visits. NACC is developing a specific packet code that can be used to distinguish these visits from true initial visits.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, next question.
Wow, everybody is so eager just to dig in and get started. We're excited.
I think I have a quick question, probably for Greg, but anyone else can answer. I recall from all of the CTF discussions that we had a lot of skip logic built in, and I'm just wondering what the expectation is on how much time that may or may not save relative to before.
I think we're going to be testing that out during the pilot. So that's one thing you can learn about at your center as you take advantage, if you take advantage of these REDCap forms that we've developed, this REDCap project, is that you've seen the skip logic demonstrated at previous meetings, and that is available now for use through the pilot.
I think, and I'll just follow up on that. I think we're going to see variability in time administration, and I think it's really important. Again, we're going to figure this out in the pilot, but the skip logic is really going to save time for those that don't have normal cognition without a lot of major comorbidities or other issues. We're going to be breezing through them. When we get some of our more complex FTD or with ALS or Lewy body patients, I think there'll be less opportunity to take advantage of that skip logic. So another reason why, for those of you that are participating in the pilots, to really choose a range. Don't just do this on all your easiest patients, because you won't really be able to set up an appropriate workflow or expectations for the amount of time that you may need with a much more complex case.
I see the UPDRS, the full motor UPDRS is reintroduced. Is formal training on that expected, mandated, desired?
Yeah, so I believe Brad Beauvais has managed to find a training video that, is that correct, Brad? Do you want to comment on that? Yes. Yes. So there is a training video for the UPDRS, and this is an area as well where I will be working with. Of course, we've continued the UPDRS at my center over the years from the get-go. So it'll be less so. But for those centers that have not been doing the UPDRS, this is something that you probably do want to work with all your clinicians to make sure that we're getting a standardized UPDRS assessment, that it's not shifting year to year depending on who's doing it.
So mandated,
John?
mandated, expected, and desired.
Yes. Yeah,
There's also, one of the reasons I ask is the Movement Disorder Society has their own mandated training you're supposed to do. Is it that we need to do, or we do Brad's?
No, that one is proprietary, very costly, and includes components of the UPDRS that involve the non-motor components as well. So we really try to do this in a streamlined fashion.
And do they know we're doing that?
Excuse me?
Do they know we're doing that?
Yeah.
I do want to also say that on Tuesday, May 14th, so next week, we will be having a UDS V4 clinical training workshop, and Form B3 focused on the UPDRS is going to be on the agenda. So we can hear from Dr. Bove then.
Thanks, Hannah. We'll take a question from the other side.
First a comment. So I think the UPDRS, the MDA version is very similar, although there's some differences. At our site, we're doing both, actually. And one thing to consider is if someone has been certified with the MDA version of the UPDRS, even though there's some differences, whether or not you would require duplicate recertification with NACC. And anyway, something to think about. And my question maybe has been answered, but it has to do with skip logic, and particularly for forms, the longer new forms like the social determinants of health. I can imagine that there might be some changes between an initial visit and the first annual follow-up and the second annual follow-up and the third annual follow-up. But I also would expect that most of those changes would be minor. Are you expecting these forms to be re-administered every year?
So the social determinants of health form is expected to be filled out at the initial visit, and subsequent follow-up visits, it will be optional for centers, given the point that you've just mentioned, that for many of those questions, there may not be substantive changes from year to year. There may be some centers that choose to apply the social determinants of health form every year as part of their standard operating procedures. Lisa, is that correct? Did I sum that up appropriately?
Yes. And that makes great sense. It would be helpful if at the top of the form or something you would sort of make it clear, what the options are and what the expectations are, just so centers will know that they don't necessarily have to repeat all the questions every year unless there have been important changes. Thank you.
Could I ask a question over here? Anybody else? Well, this has been a very helpful session. What I'd like to ask about is error checking and how at Mayo we don't use REDCap, and so I don't know its capabilities. I wonder if you could clarify, because I've heard different things. There are two issues with error checking. First is within a form, and then the second is especially across forms. And where I've had a lot of trouble over the years, or it's expended a lot of effort, is error checking when NACC returns forms to us, because I listed depression in one place, but it doesn't say that in another place, or Form B9 differs from actually from the CDR, for example. What's the capability for REDCap for doing across form and within form error checking, and are those present? Is that present in that XML file?
Yeah, so robust error checking is built into the REDCap project that has been developed, and I have actually the two folks who are on my team who are involved in developing error checks, Catherine Cathro and also Chandima here as well. If you guys want to comment on any of the details of that, please feel free to jump to the mic. Okay.
Well, I guess my understanding of what REDCap can do is a little bit more limited. So what Chandima is doing is writing all of the error checks in a JSON file, and then that will be used in a Python code to run the checks for everybody. Whether or not you're using REDCap, they're going to go through the NACC system that way, because I think REDCap doesn't have that capability of doing like across visits or within visit checks or within.
Well, that's the
form
question.
checks.
The real problem, I think, for clinicians is in making errors, having inconsistent answers, and being able to fix those in real time is a huge time saver. If we can't do that now, that's something that does need to be fixed. And I think it's important to try to work on.
Well,
I think
I want to let Catherine finish what she was saying.
I was just going to say, I think Sarah's going to answer something for me. So
I do want to say that part of it's just terrible with these mics, jeez. So the EDC work group, the REDCap project they developed also with Laura McLeod, we integrated piping and default values that should have real-time checking of some of these highly correlated or exactly the same fields. So there will be real-time support in some of the data in the REDCap project developed by the EDC work groups. But the data quality mechanisms that Chandima is creating that are more sophisticated can't be integrated into REDCap, but this is where the EDC ADRC forum comes in, and we can all discuss how we're implementing those real boots on the ground changes. But there are support in REDCap.
I'll give a really quick example of we can move data around. So like last year's, with age of onset, what it was listed at T1, and you need to match that 5 years later, we can make that visible to the clinician.
Just a good example, in the CDR, there's an orientation question. And then in B9, there's an orientation question. If I answer those inconsistently, am I going to be called then, or it's going to come back 2 months later?
We can. So at our site, we move that data so it's visible, so that we reduce those types of queries, or those inconsistencies.
Are they going to be in the?
And the plan is yes to make. And actually, our last CTF meeting, we talked specifically about this and trying to nail down which fields should be piped forward and made visible.
Yeah, and I encourage you to try, this is partly why we're doing the pilot, so you get a chance to try it out and get familiar with what error checks are built in there and what options are built in there right now, and so you'll have a chance to do that at your center in the coming months. Yep.
Hi, first of all, I just want to thank you. The CTF, the amount of work, I don't know, people kind of know, but they don't really know the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that these guys have spent.
You too, Suzanne.
Thousands, that's right.
Yeah. Yes. So the question I have, I don't think there's an answer to, but I'm wondering if there's a plan to track it. One of the things I'm most concerned about, all the things that were brought up and that Dave just brought up are very important, but another thing that's going to really delay us from getting submitted, finalized packets is the requirement for the biological component of the diagnosis. And it's very important. I'm a believer in it. But what I see is with a little bit of hand waving around, NCCRAD will get results back to us quickly, Clarity will get results back to us quickly, but those really are maybe only a few of our participants, and then a lot of them, we're doing PET scans, we're doing other things that we then need to wait on that sometimes we can't schedule, before 2 or 3 months out. And so I'm wondering this tracking of time from the participant is seen to we can make that final diagnosis. And get the packets submitted, and then we can go into Dave's weeds, which are very important about the queries and everything that are then going to be on top of that. And so it's I think we'll get a sense of that in the pilot, but it would be good to know that this is all being tracked very closely from the get-go.
Yeah, so this is something that is very much on our radar and is critically important. We have pulled together a task force, which I believe you're part of as well, that is working on developing, a special form for this that's going to capture ATN
No,
from
sir,
across.
sir, excuse me, I don't mean to.
no, okay.
No, that's a little bit different. I mean, to fill out not even that form, but the forms that now currently stand, you still need the biological diagnosis. So, guys, this is just an extra thing that marries us with the new ATN guidelines, because we're all going to be asked to use those when we publish. And so we're trying to develop a way of extracting that information. But I'm talking even the step before that, which is just the UDS4 as it now stands. We are supposed to incorporate biological data into our final diagnoses if we have it available. So that's the point I'm making. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted.
No, thanks you for clarifying.
I mean, I think this is a great point, and this was, I made a comment earlier about sort of how do we get that data to consensus, and we really want to do that at our site and really make sure it's efficient and it flows, but the forms are created in a way where it's not required. You can make a biological diagnosis on the clinical syndrome, and we can tell when it's, by the way the forms are created, if that etiological diagnosis is supported by biomarkers or not. And so it's not a requirement, and yeah, there are going to be issues, and it's going to probably take years to figure out how do we get to where the data is there when we need it, weeks or months later. So if you don't have it, you can proceed, and if you have it, great. We know you have it, and we know that it's biomarker-supported etiological diagnosis.
And so back to you, Sarah. So then, are we going to make that ATN form requirement before the packet is submitted?
No, we're not going to.
Okay.
Any other questions? I think we are out of time. So thanks everyone for joining us. Please feel free to continue to reach out with questions. Thank you to my panelists.